thinking, man. No one cares if you talk. You guys just watch the show on mute, don't you?
That's right.
Thanks for coming.
No problem. Like I said, I wasn't doing much. Sitting at home watching TV all day.
Not a bad day. After the show, I gotta tell you something that happened to me at Randall's yesterday. Involved me headbutting somebody.
A lot of your stories involve headbutting people.
Dude.
Or hurting people. Period.
Dude, like, I told this chick I'm seeing, like, I do not belong in places I'm not native to. I didn't know the Randalls.
Just like any other grocery store.
Yeah, but I feel comfortable in, like, my own little safe haven of the Heights. Okay. When I lived in the Woodlands, there was, like, 2 stores I went to. You got it going?
I accidentally hit record instead of stream. It's gonna take a second. There it is.
Are we streaming?
Yeah, we're live.
Do you want to come introduce us? It's your turn.
Mine.
You're up.
Just squeeze in there, get a little leg action.
Uh-oh.
Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Tabletop RPG Now. As always, I am your host Corey, here with Dallas, and our special guest today is Craig.
Craig.
Hi, everybody.
He's one of the few people I think I've met that's actually been gaming longer than me. So kudos to him. Kudos to Craig.
Thank you very much.
Today's episode, we're going to touch on. We were kind of flipping on what was going to be today and what was going to be in the next 2 weeks. So we decided on optional rules, variant rules, even house rules that may be applicable to your game and which ones aren't. Which one? What do you want to start with?
Our other guest of honor decide.
Special guest, Craig.
Yes.
Craig.
Optional rules, I guess, is the best one to go for. But with optional rules, I'll say this just before we get in depth in this. Optional rules are something that I will only play with if you are familiar with the general rules as a whole. Because when you jump into optional rules, it becomes a lot more complicated and a lot more difficult for you as a DM or for your players that's playing your game to understand what you're doing and what's going on with the game. Optional rules, like I said, are optional, and they only should be used if you're very familiar with with the core stuff that's already out there. So
that's a good point. If you don't know the standard rules, you probably shouldn't be trying to plug in additional rules to go with the rules you don't know.
One of the things that 5e did so great though is they really toned down what the core rules are and said, here is what you absolutely need to make this game work. And then they gave you a whole bunch of options to say, okay, now that you have your core set of game rules, here's a bunch of other stuff. You know, a lot of it's what they had in previous editions as core. Here's a bunch of additional tack-ons you can get as you get more familiar with the game set.
I think we should start off with today, and we're going to get to your questions. Zach Goodrich, I think was his name. Zach, we're going to get to your question, and Brian, we're going to get to you guys as best we can. We're going to explain all that in the end, but to start, let's start with initiative. I think initiative is a great one to start with, right?
Yeah. So there's several different ways to do initiative. The standard is everybody rolls at the start of combat, and you add your dex modifier, and then you kind of go down the list. Most DMs keep their initiative secret so that they can add or subtract monsters as needed. Do you think that's a good rule of thumb is to keep your initiative secret from the players?
I do. I think it's a great rule because not everything is always it's more than meets the eye, right? There might be hidden monsters that are ready to ambush, certain things that trigger other monsters coming into play. Craig, you've been DMing for longer than I have. What do you think of initiative? Should it be kept secret or public?
The newer players, and I say newer players, younger than me. Myself, I'm 47, going on 48 this year. So for the newer people, the newer generation that I've been playing with,
20.
that I've been playing with for the last few years here now, they seem to like the more where that everybody knows everybody initially. I particularly don't like that. Like Dallas just said, I mean, you shouldn't know what you're facing against and what they're doing in advance, or know if they go before you, they go after you, blah blah blah, because that kind of predicts about what you're going to do against certain creatures. Mm-hmm. That's why the DM's the DM, and that's why the monster that you're facing, you don't know it necessarily. You may know the monster per se, but you don't know what you're facing, or how fast that monster is, or what he has going on.
And let me touch on that real quick, Craig. Craig brought up a very good point. I'm going to kind of branch away from our overall topic, but based on what Craig is saying, I want you to understand, guys, that when we're talking about rules and optional rules, as players, let's remember that if you're fighting a caster, he may not be a wizard, a sorcerer, a warlock. He may be a caster, right? So the rules that apply to the monsters, sometimes by monster I mean combat adversary, could be different than the rules that apply to the PCs. For example, in one situation it was, well, this guy has 2 concentrations up. You don't really know his situation. There's a write-up in the monster manual called a gladiator, and I believe they get like 3 or 4 attacks a round or something. Based on his challenge rating and everything else, a normal creature of that level or challenge rating wouldn't have so many attacks a round, but the gladiator doesn't have a level, which means he doesn't really have a class. He just has a challenge rating, right? So let's remember what challenge rating stands for, okay? Sorry about that, Craig.
No, that's fine.
So as far as initiative goes, one of the ones we talked about just before we started was the optional rule where it's just group initiative. Where how does that work again, Corey?
Basically, each the players roll for their group, and the DM rolls for his group. So all the players and then all the monsters is basically two rolls, and you basically one group goes and then the next group goes, and it's good because it speeds up combat. You know, every rule and every optional rule has their pros and cons. That's why they're optional rules, right? There's good things and there's bad things about them. The big downside to this rule is that it can be devastating.
Levels 5 to 9, you should be good. Maybe 5 to 10, you might be able to lose initiative and be okay. You might lose a guy here and there. Early levels, especially, and later levels, especially, like the extremities, the really low levels and the really high levels, you lose a group initiative against a group of giants, you're done. I mean, at TPK, you may have a survivor. You know what I mean? Like, so, you know, your 5 PCs walk up on 3 giants and they go first. All 3 of them. Someone's dead. Right? So,
and it really also depends on how, you know, and how each combat's set up, right? Like, if you have the people set up, you're like, okay, guys, we're starting, you know, 1,000 feet away from each other.
Right.
You know, and it may be all right. It may work out. You know, the monsters may spread out enough so that it, you know, that's like under the DM control, right? The DM can make it so that it's not as bad for the players. But generally speaking, when you have 5 bad guys going or 10 bad guys going all at the same time, and they're playing in a realistic fashion, you're probably going to have a player dying every single round.
What do you think? What do you think, Obi-Wan?
I hate it.
Hate it.
I hate group initiatives. I mean, I would never do it unless I felt that it was, because I'm all about people having fun, and unless it's fun for the group, unless it's fun for the people I'm running for, I wouldn't necessarily do it unless I knew that their outcome is not as devastating as they may believe it would be. So, and with that being said, I will avoid that one. I would avoid group initiative unless you're just if you're trying to rush through it, find a better way of doing it. Because group initiative is basically, if I roll 17, they roll 5, I go first. My guys is pretty much is going to wipe your guys before you get a chance to wipe my guys. Bottom line.
So there's also very other optional ways to do initiative, guys. I think overall, unless you have so many people on the field that you can group up, like Craig and Corey's characters will go together. mine and Johnny's character will go together. These 3 bad guys will go together. Sometimes you can group them up like that if there's that many people on the field, and that can be acceptable. But there are lots of ways to do initiative. For the most part, guys, on standard encounters, unless it's on a grand scale, I personally appreciate and prefer the standard way of initiative. That's just me. Do you guys agree or disagree?
What do you think about, and this is another optional one that some people like to do, and I would say it's very limiting based on how many PCs you have, but one of the things that a lot of people like to do is a initiative every round, so that way you don't know when people are going to go. Like it's not as predictable, like the monster may go first one round, or the player may go first in one round, so you can't necessarily predict what the monsters are going to do and say, oh well, this guy's round isn't up yet, so I can save this cleric before the monster comes out, because that's kind of set in stone with regular initiative.
I'll let Craig answer first.
First of all, to answer Dallas' question before, I agree with Dallas as far as initiative goes, as far as game individual initiative. As far as the question that Corey just brought up, that one is fine. The problem with that, in larger groups, it'll take forever.
Yeah.
If you have all day, so be it.
Exactly that's what I was getting. If you have a group of like 4 PCs and your combats are quick and short, it's fine. But if like our Saturday game, we have 8 PCs, right? So 8 PCs and then bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're you have to assuming everyone spends 2 minutes on their turn, one round from the PC side is 16 minutes, right? So that we have a large group though, right? So in an average group of 5, so you spend 2 minutes. That's 10 minutes for the PCs to go, plus the bad guys need to go. I wouldn't mind saying every 5 rounds. Usually fights don't go that long, but like in the old Pride Fighting Championships, they had 3 rounds. The first round was 10 minutes, and the second and third round were both 5 minutes apiece, right? They didn't want you to finish the first round. They wanted there to be a finish in the fight. So I wouldn't mind if you set a number, said every so many rounds we reroll initiative. Like I would be okay with that. But the idea of like all the combats, keeping track of reactions and everything else on top of changing initiative every single time, because really I think it's kind of overkill. You know what I mean? I think it's overkill, which brings me to another variant rule for initiative, which is passive initiative, right? What you're talking about?
It's you basically take Dex mod plus 10.
So, I'm okay with passive initiative if you don't have a lot of time. Like if you're limited on time, but I don't want someone in my group, if Craig the Knight has an 8 Dex, but he's just a tank. I don't want him to be kind of discouraged in every fight because he's never going to get to run up and hold the line the way he was meant to, because he's always too slow, because he's never going to get the jump on anyone.
Mm-hmm.
That's my issue with it. What do you think, Craig?
Honestly, I don't have a problem. Honestly, I really don't have a problem with it. It's like I said, when you're creating your character are meant to serve a particular role, and that role is based off of the class that you pick and the race and blah blah blah, the whole 9 yards. But when it comes to initiative, every class is not going to be fast. Every class can't be fast.
Sure.
And with that being said, you have to work with your DM. And I say this, I'm saying this because people don't necessarily like to work with their DM all the time when they come to their class. They like to be pretty much pulled back because they feel it's their baby. But you have to work with the DM with your class, because if your character is say you have a 7 Dex, you have full plate armor, and you're a dwarf. You're the slowest thing on the planet. It takes you 2 or 3 rounds to get there. You're not gonna hold the line. You're not gonna be able to do what your guy, the tank, you hope you will eventually be. But That's why we have levels. That's why we eventually get better.
Magic items.
And that's why we eventually try to acquire magical items or different skills that will eventually get you to a point where you are that fast person or that fast fighter.
Very good.
So with that being said, I wouldn't necessarily be too discouraged with that point that was brought up. All I will say is that if you like this character, you really want it to be the best character that you think it can be, work with your DM, work on it, and try to make that improvement happen.
Yeah, I would say that next to standard initiative, that's probably
the most effective.
Me personally, the reason I don't like it is because at the end of the day, this is a game, and to play the game, you gotta like roll dice and stuff. So like for me, the more chances I get to roll stuff, the better. Like I always roll for my HP. I always roll for stats, roll for all that stuff. You can take average on all that stuff, right? And that's okay, and that's fine for games. But like me personally, I always think of it like I'm playing a game here. Why am I just here?
Why are you min-maxing?
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. So.
Well, you remember back in the day, Dallas, back when first and second edition, you used to add your weapon speed as well on top. Speed factor on top of all that to get your initiative.
You wanted the low number,
right?
Remember?
So I mean,
you started at 1.
So I mean, it's changed a lot since I played. But I mean, like I said, the variant rules for all initiative are optional. And like I said, unless you're familiar with the rules and what's going to eventually happen in the long run, because you got to think long term. You can't think the short term. You got to think long term. If you're very familiar with the rules and you're okay with trying to change it up, and your players are okay with changing it up, then I would try it. Actually, if you want to try it for a session or two and see how it goes.
Mm-hmm. So, real quick to touch on what he said before we go to the next one, because there's a pretty meaty one that we're gonna hit about the 330 mark, I think. But to touch base on what he said about the older editions. That's something personally that I wish they would bring back, was the speed factor, because a lot of times in the newer editions you have people go, man, why would I choose this weapon over this weapon, because this weapon has more properties and does the same damage as this weapon. It makes this weapon null and void. From a world development phase as a DM hint, I'm just going to say two weapons. I may not be 100% correct on this for the time, but let's use scimitar, right? Scimitar and I think short sword. I believe scimitars weigh a little more, or one of them weighs more than the other.
Scimitar way more.
And the other one is light and finesse and does the same damage. Why would you ever choose one over the other one? The only argument I can give you from a DM's perspective is maybe such weapons aren't everywhere.
Right. One of the things that that somebody brought up on Reddit, and I thought it was a pretty good point. He said that even though the stats are the same, the reason that they added the cost in there, because the cost is marginal in any game you play. Once you're past level 2 or 3, you're like,
whatever.
Yeah, whatever. It's like a gold. They say that the reason that the cost is there is it's not for the players. It's for, okay, we're level 10. We have a small army now. We have to outfit this army. Each one of these weapons is 5 gold a piece. Does the same thing as this other weapon that's 10 gold a piece, but maybe not as many properties. When you're talking about large scale, purchases, it's like, $2,000 versus $10,000, or
right. And you have to, and again, remember, guys, as far as cost goes, this is going to be in the next episode. But remember that something shouldn't necessarily cost 5 gold everywhere you go. Right? Things should change. So, moving on from initiative and that, I think the next thing I think we should touch base on, which I know a lot of DMs don't use. I'm fairly certain that you won't find a Dungeon Master and Adventure League to use it, but the old Living Greyhawk, the Living Forgotten Realms used to be pretty aware of it, was the carrying capacity. Carrying capacity in itself is pretty much an optional role as a whole, right? Like, what I mean is there's the standard way, for example, like if you have armor, certain armors have a certain strength requirement, mm-hmm. right? But if you're using the carrying capacities, the strength requirement
goes away.
Right. So, that being said, my personal preference, I like the carrying capacity. it makes things a little bit more realistic, and it makes things to where you don't have one PC holding 2,000 arrows, but they're behind the 600 swords he's carrying when he defeated the army and picked up the sword from every person so he could sell them in town, right? So I like carrying capacity. There's a variant rule that the one I'm using where 5 times your strength is
light encumbrance.
Anything under 5 is okay. 10 is medium encumbrance, and then 15 times your strength is your max. So that's the one I go off of. There's another one that's just 15 times your strength, and that's it. After that, you're considered heavily encumbered. I think that's the standard, I believe. Do you know the difference between them offhand?
Not offhand, no.
So we use the one that's 5, 10, and 15, but there's one that it's 15 times your strength, and then that kind of correlates to the armor rule, right? So just remember which one you're using, and make sure that if you're using one of the carrying capacities, that you are removing the strength restriction from the armors.
Yeah, a lot of these optional rules, they add depth to a certain aspect of the game, and one of the key things to keep in mind is that you keep a balance between how much stuff, like the simplicity and the complexity of it. Like each thing you add is gonna multiply the complexity of your game, and it's gonna bog it down. If you add too much stuff, it's gonna take forever to get anything done. There's gonna be so many rules to remember. You'll kind of lose track of the fun of it, and because it's just a math game at that point. You're like, oh, I gotta do this, gotta do that.
I'm half pound over.
30 minutes later, okay, guys, I'm ready for round 1 of initiative. So keep in mind that when you're choosing your optional rules, to kind of be picky. A lot of these rules are good, but just because a lot of them are good doesn't mean you should use them all. Mm-hmm. Because you will overburden your game, and it'll bog it down, and it'll be less fun for your players.
Craig?
I agree completely.
Okay, so talking about additional optional rules.
Let's talk about stats.
Before we go down.
That's a great one.
Stats is really good. I like stats. In fact, I was going to say something about what Craig said earlier, talking about, speed factor in the older editions. I remember in the second edition of Believe Player's Handbook, or 2.5, I think it was 2.5, it had all these variant rules for rolling your stats, right? And it said if you do anything other than 36 straight down, you are trying to mathematically curve yourself to get better stats. So, I want to do 46, drop the lowest, or I'm going to roll 5 sets of 36 and I have to take the third one. What you're doing is you're trying to find a way to make your stats better. Mm-hmm. Because, now one of your comrades from the Saturday game had told me, she said, just because that this was the first way it was done doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way or the best way. I feel like I don't like pre-generated stats personally. Before Craig says anything, I'm going to, let's see if I'm right, I'm going to think he agrees with me. He may not agree with the way I roll stats, he may want them different, harder, easier, but I'm pretty sure he doesn't like pre-generated. And the reason why is because I just remember in the old days when certain classes that were openly stronger than others, like the Paladin and the Ranger, those were like super classes in the old days. And I remember you would roll your stats and you'd be like, oh my god, all I need is a 14. All I need is a 14 and I can actually play a Paladin.
All I need.
Like one more 14, or guys, I have everything. All I got to do is get a 9 on this, I got that 17 charisma I need, and and so you're rolling these stats to see if you qualified for one of the super classes. By dumbing all the classes down and making them all even, except for the Bard, but making them all even, it kind of took away from that. But I like the idea that everyone that comes to the table is not mathematically and mechanically equal, because this isn't the real world where certain religious books say we're all created equal. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, realistically, if I put you in a room with 30 people, are you going to say, well, we're all going to score the same test on a math test, we're all going to run the 40-yard dash in the same... No. Some people are going to be better at certain things than others. Right?
Right.
What do you think?
So it sounds like you're personally a fan of the 3d6 straight down, like classic.
But I do take a minimum. Like, I don't let anyone take under 7.
Right. So Craig, what do you like? What do you like to do?
I like point buy.
You like point buy?
I like point buy.
I was wrong.
Because point buy, at least you have the option to make a fairly decent character.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying that it's the best way, but it's a good way, especially if you're under time restraints. If you're trying to pump out a character quick enough, and you're trying to get out there and play initially, and you're trying to start a new game, whatever, point buy is probably the easiest way, the quickest way of doing it. It's very simple. It's very quick. You don't worry about rolling dice, and you don't worry about people fudging their rolls. You're not actually paying attention to them rolling their rolls, stuff like that. It's pretty simple. You know exactly. You can add it up and see exactly what they come out with, and there's no questions asked. The rolls, I can go either way. I can go any way with the 3d6, 4d6. The book says
it wrong.
The book says 4d6. I can care either way. The reason why I don't particularly like the way Dallas does so much is that with 3d6 straight down, without being able to flip or flop your stats the way you want to place them, kind of makes it like, okay, well, just because I rolled back here and I got an 18 here,
you feel pigeonholed into playing something that you don't necessarily want
exactly.
to play.
And Dallas doesn't necessarily do that. Dallas says you can still play what you want. It doesn't matter because there's no class restriction. There's no stat restriction on the class you play. But still, I mean, if I have an 18 charisma and I want to play a fighter and I only have a 7 strength,
you want to be effective.
I want to be effective. Yeah. I want to be somewhat effective.
So in that exact example, I'm going to reference one of the guys from the Saturday game who's playing a wizard, and he said, I think he first started, I think he had like a 9 or 10 int, right? And so he decided that he was going to be an enchanter, and he said, well, I don't need a strong save DC to be an enchanter because I'm just buffing people. I'm going to focus on buffing people, right? But if you look at his background was like bounty hunter, so he was like a pit fighter using pit fighting tactics to get information to get his bounties, who became a wizard later on. And like, it was a really unique and dynamic story. If I had a 9 or a 7 strength and an 18 charisma and I'm a fighter, I'm probably more of a leadership type of person, right? Like, I'm more of a tactician than I am a brute. That's how I think of it. So, and I'm not saying, I also do things in my games that allow stats to go up and down, right? So your stats go up and down. So there are additional variant rules that we'll get into house rules in just a bit. But what's your call on it, Corey?
So I'm sure all of you know my stance. I like rolling for things. So I would say the actual optional rule in the book, which I think the second optional rule is 46 and take 30. And you basically just put them where you want. I think that's a good balance between, what he likes about rolling and what he likes about making effective characters, because you're still rolling for all your stuff. You can still roll really shitty, but you have the option to choose where you're putting, your stats. So if you have a character concept in mind, if you have something that you want to play, you can still feasibly do it. Whereas if you just kind of roll stuff randomly, you still may end up doing something along his lines where you make a unique character. I think that it also goes down to your personal playstyle. Like if you have strong ideas about what you want to play, I think that point buy is fantastic. Point buy and stat array are both fantastic options. Difference being stat array is just like, here's your stats, put them where you want, and point buy is, here's how many points you have to allocate towards your stats, and then the DM can actually balance it. Say, all right, this is going to be a high-powered campaign, so I'm going to give you guys some more points to put in, or this is going to be low-powered, so you're going to have less points to put in. So he can kind of indirectly control how powerful each character is. But I think it's a great way for, like, if you're playing a character who doesn't, if you basically just show up for the game and you're just like, I don't really care what I play, I just kind of want to play something. I think rolling straight down is a great way to get ideas on a character concept. You're like, oh, look at all this cool stuff I did. So you're kind of building your character as you're playing your character, as opposed to building your character idea before you're coming into the game. Before we touch base on the one more quick thing. One of the neat things about if you do
what I like to do with 3d6 straight down. The game that I'm running now that these guys are in, weren't able to do so because I went from beta to core and they were already done, and I kind of helped them out in the beginning. But what I like to do is, based on their backstory, based on their and Craig was there, he remembers, but you weren't there for the absolute beginning. But what I like to do is, based on their backstory, based on their background and the character they've designed, I give them additional points in certain things to start the game, right? So as a DM, when you start them off with an overall lower score perspective, you get to award them things that they seem to be more appreciative of versus my point buy gave me an 18, right? So that's why I like the lower stuff, because I like to help build them and I like them to feel like they're earning things, right? But we have about 3 or 4 minutes to go over one that I think is very important. And actually, I saw something yesterday that even more solidified my belief that my or our house rule for death rolls is so much better than core. And I'm going to explain it to you. And we went over this before. We went over this when we were talking about settings, remember? Mm-hmm. So death rolls. So very simple. Corey, explain to me again, when I'm unconscious and bleeding out, how it works.
So by core, when you're unconscious, if somebody makes a melee attack against you, they're at advantage. It's basically they took out coup de grace and basically put it into the unconscious trait. So if you're in melee range, you attack them, you're at advantage. If you hit them, it's an auto crit. By rules, if you crit somebody who's unconscious, that's 2 failed death saves. So by raw, you basically need 2 hits on somebody to auto kill them in melee range. By raw, you need 3 hits on anything to just auto kill them. Like they don't get a chance. It's just auto failed death saves. It's very deadly.
So that being said, in a game where raw says I have 1 hit point left and I get hit for 7,000 points of damage, I'm unconscious, and he heals me with a cantrip or a bonus heal for 1 point, I'm suddenly awake again. In a world where you can cleave someone in half and accidentally spilling a drop of a healing potion can pop them back up, you're probably going to maul what's down, realistically, right? So, and a lot of creatures have 2 and 3 attacks. If they drop you, why wouldn't they finish you off? So they hit you with said gladiator. Said gladiator hits you, drops you, has 2 more attacks, finishes you off, 2 crits. That's 4 death saves. You're dead. Now he can safely move on to the next target, knowing that you're not going to pop up behind him. Now, if you're the kind of DM that doesn't play to the int and wisdom of your bad guys, and you're like, well, this zombie should keep eating the bad guy, but he's going to go after someone else that's standing, then by all means, raw's great. Rule that we've kind of been incorporated, and it seems to work, is we actually use negative hit points. So negative hit points being you're dead at 10 plus your level plus your con. And it seems to scale pretty well because you scale with your level, and your con goes up as well, right? So we like that because when we use heals, if you're at -5 and you heal for 8, you're at 3. In a setting like that, you automatically stabilize when you heal, but in a setting like that, realistically, if I see that your ribs are hanging out and I assume you're dead, I don't have to worry about someone spilling a drop of a potion of healing and getting you up again. So maybe I finish you off. Maybe I go after someone else that looks like to be more of a threat to save my friend. I have more options now. And I watched in a game where one of the most important PCs in the game just yesterday in Battlefield Interactive, and we'll go into those later, he was hit 4 times by AoEs after he was down. He actually had a stone that stabilized him at the start of every turn. Even with such a powerful item, he died. Because that's what those wizards that we were attacking us would have done. They were storming the castle or the city wall. That's what they would have done. So as far as death rolls go, guys, I'm not telling you not to use raw. I'm just telling you that there are variant rules and house rules out there that may be more applicable to your world, your setting.
So I think that in regards to his death rolls are a little bit more lenient. But death is more permanent in his world. By Raw, death is not so permanent. So while death is more common in Raw, you have more options to revive characters. Like it's fairly easy. It's like a 3rd level spell to pull somebody up within a minute of them dying, which is most combats really. And then you can resurrect them, at a higher level, or pay the money to resurrect them, get them resurrected at a higher level, and it'll effectively just be gold drain on your party. I think that both options work fine. It just depends on what kind of campaign you want to run.
Agree.
You agree?
Yep.
All right, so we're hitting the a little bit over. So we're gonna touch base now, guys, on something that I think Craig will be pretty vocal about. I ended up not being wrong last time because he said it could go either way. Like, I'm correct. So
we don't always agree, so I want to make that clear. You see, you got 3 different.
He doesn't
opinions.
always see the right way of things. No, I'm kidding. But no. So one of the most important and controversial optional topics most people don't even acknowledge is a variant rule. I don't think is multiclassing.
Yeah, I mean, feats, multi-class, those are things that people just automatically assume is there.
Is part of the game, yeah.
Yeah, but they are feats.
And,
I mean, they are optional.
Going back, going way back, I remember there was a difference between dual classing and multi-classing, and I was more reasonable, more accepting of it back then because you didn't get so powerful as a whole, right? So and multi-classing really kind of hurt you in the long run, because what you would do is you would take, let's say you were playing a fighter mage. Every time you got XP, you would split it between both classes, and each type of class, like fighter, wizard, had a different XP pool.
Correct.
So not only were you a fighter wizard, and wizards had like the hardest XP level, you're splitting the XP in half, so you're the hardest thing to level, and you're getting half the XP of everyone else, right? So yeah, you're gonna have all these neat tricks from fighter and wizard, but you're gonna be level 2-1 when everyone else is level 4-5, right? So you could see how that would hurt you in the long run, but because of the way it was done, you didn't see a lot of it back then, right, Craig?
Yeah. People primarily stay core. And the other reason why people multi-class back in the day, or back in my time, was because, like we said, like Dallas said many times before, and like I'm about to say, you have smaller groups. Small groups, multi-classing, you probably gonna need it, because if you have a group of two to 4, you may need that extra. You may need that extra class just to get past what your classes need, what your group need to get by. So that's when multi-classes are more prevalent. That's why multi-class was initially put into play, because you can't cover all the classes that need to be covered with 2 to 3 players, 2 to 4 players, or whatever. So,
at which point the DM might even be a little bit more lenient on how the XP is awarded. I think if you have 3 players,
right? But primarily, first, second, even not 3rd edition so much, but 1st and 2nd edition. Primarily, people stayed with one class because it's so hard to level classes. Because if you start splitting your classes up, XP's are, even if I got 10,000 XP for every adventure, it's being split. It's 5,000 to each class. Or back then you could even triple class. You can triple multi-class. I could be 3 different classes back in the day, but it took me forever to get to the same level everybody else was. Everybody else is 15th level. I'm still working on 6, 7.
Yeah, 5th,
6, whatever.
So
I will say that multi-classing in 5th edition is probably the most complicated thing in the core rulebook.
I don't agree with multi-classing for the most part, and here's why. Post 3rd edition, since 3rd edition, we have had, I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say, and you're going to think that I'm using race instead of class first, but I heard a guy say one time, I'm going to play it was called a Dragon. It was similar to a Dragonborn, I think, in 3rd edition. Like, I'm going to play a Dragon wizard because I want to be a wizard, but I want to be meaty with some hit points. Like, that was his reason for going Dragon, right? Was I need extra HP. So whereas that's a race thing, like a lot of people use that mentality when creating characters, like especially in the old 3.5, third edition. Well, every character I play, like Corey's DMing, right? Hey Dallas, what do you think about playing? You know my first level's rogue. I go for the skills every time. Then I'm probably going to go ranger after that, or I always go ranger for dual wielding, and then I think I'm going to go wizard, so I can dual wield staves or something. You know, like people thought like that. Like their whole concept was, it was in third edition, almost encouraged it. You couldn't get mad at them. It encouraged it because there were no weaknesses for multiclassing for the most part. And I know someone out there is watching going, oh, well, multiclassing limits you here and it limits you here. No, I mean, in third edition, remember guys, I'm a pro fighter. In third edition, monks, before 3.5, monks could attack for a d20 damage. There is nothing that you can tell me will convince me that if I had a longsword and you were a well-trained Shaolin monk or came from any of the greatest MMA or boxing schools in the world, you are going to hit or do a combo of attacks to me that is going to do more damage than if I swung a sword. And not only do you do more damage, you do 2.5 times the damage on average, right? So
because of your key, you're magical.
And no, that was without key. That was just attacking. So
no, I mean like concept wise.
No, key made it worse, but key made it even stronger. But my point is that there were a lot of prestige classes for monk. Not really any reason to take them. Just go, but monk is one of the few things. But even if you started multi-classing away from monk, when they dropped it down to D12 and 3.5, you could just build these ridiculously broken characters, and I think that's the wrong idea. I think multi-classing is okay from a DM's perspective. I always require an elaborate backstory as to why you're changing. Something has to happen. So maybe I'm a fighter, and I've been doing this stuff, and I have a near-death experience, and a creature comes to me a great creature comes to me, great old one path or pact, and grants me second life, but now I'm pacted to him. Now I'm a warlock.
So, like, if I can interrupt you there, I think that's the core. I think that's as it's intended to be. I think, like, what you were describing in your experience with third edition is metagaming. It's metagaming to say, oh, I spent 2 levels as a fighter, now I'm going to switch over to a ranger just because I get this skill, this skill, this skill.
Right.
That is, by definition, metagaming. I mean that's just what it is. Like it's okay to like plan stuff, but if you're kind of going into the game and you're switching as the story progresses, how would you know that the ranger automatically gets dual wielding proficiency at 2 levels into it?
More importantly, if you spent your whole life trying to be a wizard, how did you learn how to pick pockets and become a rogue? Like, how did you? If you were a warrior with a 2-handed weapon, how did you learn how to become a wizard like that? Oh, now that you have 58 HP and you can wear heavy armor, now you're a wizard? Give me my first level spells. I took my first level wizard. I get 2 of them off the top. They magically appear here. That's dumb. Any way you cut it, that's dumb. What do you think, Craig?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, bottom line, multiclassing is primarily. I wouldn't do it unless it's a small group, and to multi-class or dual class or whatever the case may be. If you're familiar with 3.5 and the Pathfinder editions, then you know what we're talking about. You understand the whole concept of it. It's just that I wouldn't allow my group to start dibbing and dabbing into multi-classing. It's hard enough to try to learn one class. To learn 2 classes and try to be the best at 2 classes,
blending them,
is even more hard, and especially trying to make it feasible for your game, in essence, your game. Because what the players don't understand is that on top of that, when me as a player, if I try to, for instance, be a rogue wizard and not trying to do the classes that they got in the book, if I try to be basically a straight rogue and a straight wizard and trying to combine those two. What they don't understand is the DM has to compensate for what you're doing too. So, bottom line, I'm playing this rogue mage. I'm thinking I'm maximizing, like Corey said. I'm maximizing because I get sneak attack. I can do all this stuff. I can hide, stealth, whatever they call it nowadays, and still be able to cast spells. I can do all this stuff. Okay, well that's fine. But the DM has to compensate for everything that you do, and it's probably not in your best interest if you're trying to play a party-friendly group to do that. If you're playing by yourself or one other player, okay, yeah, you probably gonna need the multi-class, and then it's different. It's a whole different scenario. But to multi-class, I would avoid it. I wouldn't allow my players to play it unless it's a small group. And
yeah, I mean, just think about the roles of the group. You know, like there's tank mage, you know, damage dealer,
striker,
healer,
defender, controller.
Yeah, there's all these different roles in the party, and if you want to combine roles, that's what the hybrid classes are for. I mean, they were designed for that. You know, when you say, oh, we have Rick the Warrior in my party, I'm a mage, but because he gets, you know, full plate or whatever, I'm going to go take a few levels in Warrior. You're taking away from Rick the Warrior because he felt like he was defending you from harm because you're so squishy, but now that you're right up there with him in full plate, he kind of feels useless now.
It also takes it also takes away from, you know, I always say in the old days, but in the old days, you know, you had your fighter, your wizard, your cleric, and your thief. Those are your core classes, and your bard was like your unofficial fifth. The problem with the problem with multi-classing is when you start, you know, 3rd edition got so drowned out, they were making classes that were making other classes obsolete.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's ways to do the multi-classing where utilizing templates or create your own little prestige class, however you want to do it, to where you became a warlock because this thing happened to you. That's kind of an okay story. Something along those lines. There's a quest that allows them to become warlocks or something like.
But even that's still within the school of magic. If you're a mage, bard, or whatever, and something along the storyline turns you into, for whatever reason, a warlock, for instance, that's a little different than saying, okay, now I'm a mage, I'm a spellcaster. Oh, now I want to be a paladin now.
Well, no. The problem though is with, like, for example, like utilizing warlock, and we'll use paladin for example. A lot of people in 4E were blending paladin warlock because they went really well together. They still go pretty well together.
Yeah.
Just like paladin rogue goes really well together. But here's the deal: if you were ever a rogue, you were never a paladin, right? Like, and I still don't like the idea that paladins can be any alignment. Like, I think that's absurd. Paladins are meant to be lawful good.
Yeah. I mean, I would go as far as lawful neutral too.
Lawful neutral, you know, even lawful evil. Like, I'm okay with like a dark paladin, it's fine. But I can make a chaotic neutral paladin. The concept's insane. So
yeah, I mean,
I'm the champion of I don't really care. You know, like, you know, I mean, it's dumb, right? Let's get your guys' input. What do you guys think of multi-classing and the rules we went over today as far as variants? We're going to spend the next 15 minutes or so, and trying to keep time, guys, because we got an extra person here today.
One thing I will say real quick on multi-classing: be sure if you utilize it, make sure you understand it. It's really, I mean, the rules for it are very complex. You know, when you're going from spellcaster to spellcaster, or, you know, make sure that you have good knowledge of what the player can do when he's multi-classing, because that is probably the number one I see that people get wrong is oh, I multi-classed into this. I'm a warlock, I multi-classed into wizard, I all of a sudden get a bunch of spell slots.
You don't get everything.
You get the wizard spell slots. They're still, like, they stay separate.
Yes.
You know, just make sure you have a good understanding of what they get.
And lastly, guys, talking about wizards, one of the things I do is they say that every time you level up, you get 2 spells. You know, I still make the wizard go hunt for his spells, and the reason I do that, you know, in the beginning, the wizards in my game, you know, including Craig, they were kind of back and forth about it, but they have more spells at their level than they should have, right? So as a DM, you can do that as an optional rule, but you have to make sure that those spells will somehow be available or optional for them to acquire. So if you don't want to deal with that, then fine. Give them the 2 spells a level. They find an occasional spell here and there and move on. But if you don't want to do that, make sure that you make the spells available to them, right? In some strict form or fashion. So moving on the last 15 minutes before we get to the last official 30, Q&A. Want to talk about that real quick?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like the whole rest of the show is probably going to be Q&A for the most part, because we'll be directly answering the question. But yeah, like we'll go ahead and answer some quick questions before getting into the longer question.
Okay. So one of the questions that was brought from Zach on the site was, in creating my world, how did I take pieces from Dragonlance and Mystara? So I didn't directly take anything, right? I didn't say, Corvair from Eberron is in my world. No, I didn't do any of that. As I stated before, Birthright was my favorite campaign setting, right? So in my world, the gods had this major war where the gods died and other things ascended to become deity-like. They're not really deities. There's a celestial river called the River Mortal. The point is, there's other celestial beings and entities that are available to worship, right? But when the gods died, their essence fell into the ground, creating cursed lands, creating wild magic areas, and allowing some creatures to become what's called blooded, or on Shanglion, and the other term is Ashkanalon, which basically means you become corrupted with blood. Now, if you're considered blooded, it means you're containing the blood and you're acquiring the powers. This is something that I took directly from Birthright. What I took from Mystara, I blended with the Birthright concept, and it worked out magnificently. In Mystara, there's an ore called Cinnabril, okay? And there's these red curse lands that you have to, if you travel through there, you have to have the Cinnabril. But as long as you travel through there, the Cinnabril will slowly become like encrusted with this red power, losing its defense mechanisms against the red steel, the red curse lands. And then you can take this red Cinnabril and make red steel weapons. So I'm using the blooded powers that make corrupted lands and wild magic lands in my world from the dead gods. And I'm saying that those cursed lands, the reason why those lands are cursed the way they similarly are in Mystara is because of this other happening. I'm just taking the concepts and making them my own. I didn't say that all of Birthright's gods died, so all of my gods died. I gave a whole backstory and description as to why my gods went to war with an outside entity, etc., etc., etc. As far as Mystara, I took the idea of the red steel, the red cursed lands, things like that, but the origins as to why they exist are different. The reason why there are certain blooded in my world, Craig has become blooded in my world, and he's not an Unshanglion or an Ashkanalon. He's not an abomination yet, or ever. He may make it. We don't know yet, but we do know of all the characters that could have been blooded. He's probably the strongest with able to contain it. But most importantly, mimicry is like the biggest form of flattery. So I really like these places. I really loved Mystara. I loved Dragonlance, and I loved Birthright. So I took these different things from them. And as far as Dragonlance went, what did I take? I took the concept that healing magic isn't as strong, and I also took the concept that there are no real gods. There was a time in Dragonlance where the gods had left the land, right? And so I took these concepts. Now again, I didn't say the gods left Dragonlance, therefore the gods of Thadia are gone. I took these ideas and kind of spun them into where they would work for Thadia, the name of my world, for my world. And I hope that answers your question.
It's not another question. Sorry, answer.
Yeah. So the next part of his question was how your personal, you read it, personal view, I guess,
or just my experience in general with
okay.
with your game.
Okay.
Yeah, so in general, I like his game. There's good sessions, there's bad sessions, there's okay sessions. Not every session's going to be the best. I'm very vocal when I talk to him about what I like and what I dislike, and usually it's not necessarily even anything he can change. It's just kind of, here's what happened today, this is what I didn't like, yada yada yada. And I think that's good to do, is to kind of keep an open dialogue with your DM. But try and stay positive. Don't just say, "Oh, this sucked, that sucked, this sucked." You know.
Oh, you can say it. No, not in the record. You can say it, but try to say it after the game. After the game.
Oh yeah.
If you want to tell your DM, he sucks and what he done sucked, and I think this is wrong. I think my character would have done this and that, and blah blah blah. That's fine. Just do it after the game. Don't do it while the game's going.
Well, there's a difference between criticism and constructive criticism. You want to be giving constructive criticism, like,
of course.
Say,
I was kidding. He didn't get the flat. I was
hey man,
kidding.
you killed my PC. I didn't think that was great. Maybe never do that again.
That's right. No, but yeah, like just as an example, I sent out an email saying that I didn't particularly like the last session we had. It was it was kind of it wasn't bad. It was just it was kind of bland for me as a character because I didn't feel like I made any choices. I didn't do anything that was epic or anything like that. I was just kind of along for the ride. Like I felt like if I had been absent that session, everything would have gone the same way. Like nothing would have really changed.
So to interrupt, the session began about 11 o'clock. We usually begin around 10 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
The session began at 11 and it usually runs till about 7 or 8 o'clock, right? So it usually ends about 7:30, 8 o'clock. 5 hours of that was the team arguing. 4 hours of that or so. I mean, it was insane. Like I literally didn't even need to be there. Like I literally didn't need to be there. The team was arguing amongst themselves about a variety of things. So, as literally, I could have showed up at 3 o'clock and maybe 4, and about 3 o'clock, and I would have been fine. I literally could have showed up at 3 o'clock and been fine.
But there again, it's not like I would say, oh, you were a shitty DM this session, right? It's just these things happen all together. Like these were conversations, like the arguments that we had, they needed to happen. It's not like we were.
Some sessions are going to be grinding.
Yeah.
Some sessions are going to be.
You're not going to love every session. That's just the way the game goes.
So we have a guest here, and Zach was interested in what you had to say about the game. Craig's in the game as well, so let's get his insight while he's here.
Just to give you a point, my character is a mage. He's a wizard. He's a 12th level wizard. 13 technically. 13 technically, but 12th level.
And you've been in the game since the very beginning, right?
I started. Me and my son started at the very beginning when Dal started this game.
When was that? Was that like
almost 2 years?
Almost 2 years. Wow.
Almost 2 years ago. But my character initially wasn't a wizard. I initially started off with a bard. I modeled this character after Loki. I wanted him to be more like Loki and how he perceived the world and how he perceived everything else around him. He wasn't as mischievous or as devious as Loki, but he was getting there. He was going down that road, and that's the road I saw him going down. And I primarily took a back seat, and I told Dallas this before. My initial reason for joining his campaign at that time, was to see my son grow and see my son learn how to play and help him role play. He was only 12 at the time, 11, 12 at the time. He's 13 now, and I wanted him to grow as a player because he started getting interest in the game, being that young, and that was my whole thing about beating the game. It wasn't about me because, like I said, I've been playing over 25 years. So for me, role playing for me, I don't see enough role playing. I love role playing more than I love combat, more than I love anything else. I love to get involved in the character. I love to immerse myself in the character I play. There's no class I can't play. There's no race I can't play. I can play them all without a problem, and I can get into the character and play them to the T. So it doesn't matter for me. But for my son, it matters more, and that's why I always try to take a back seat. That's the reason why I picked that type of character. But regardless of that, right now I'm playing a wizard, and my wizard is becoming more powerful. He's aware of his power, and he's aware that he is becoming more powerful within the group. Whether that makes him a target, whether that makes him a piece that will eventually become something that the group may have to deal with, it's still up in the air because I'm playing him more as a balancer, a neutral. Even though he's a invoker, I'm playing him more as a balanced, neutral character where he doesn't care so much about good winning or evil winning. He cares more about himself and about how he progressed as a mage. He cares about the magic more than he cares about people in general. Now, there are certain people that have been in his life that he has took it in as more of, I would say, a not so much as a buddy-buddy relationship, but more as something he feel like a pet. His first pet primarily was a monk that eventually died, and once that happened, he kind of lost focus as far as choosing another pet. Now he has reinvented himself to find that there's another player in the group that's falling along that same line as being his pet again. And she is a cleric. This one's playing a cleric this time. So he's kind of going back to his old ways of thinking. But my character, like I said, my character is blooded. My character is a wizard. He is fairly powerful with his spells. He chooses spells primarily. He knows that his role is to do damage. Nothing more, nothing less. He doesn't want to be a leader. He doesn't want to be in charge. He doesn't care about, all he cares about is research and his spells. That's all he really cares about.
So one of the things that I'll say I really like about the Saturday game actually is that as a DM, you actually feel like you've accomplished. When you sit down and the players are arguing and you can't even tell what's in character and what's out of character because they are so vehemently convinced what their next actions are. And so, they were so each one was so convinced of what needed to happen, right? They were all determined to make certain things. They were all determined, and so they were all speaking. And we might even be able to get Corey to do Elvis for us. You wanna do Elvis? You wanna do Elvis? I think you should do Elvis.
No, not this time. We'll do it some other time.
No.
We'll bring it out.
Wow. Well, put him on the spot, and he failed. So that goes to show, if you go to rob a bank and you need someone on the spot to hook you up, we don't call Corey. Right. He fails. So really let us down there, man. But no, so it's fun. I knew there were 2 sessions in the 40+ sessions this game has had that I knew were going to be tough, grinding, not so fun sessions, and the last one was one of them, and there was one a while back that I knew was going to be about 7 sessions ago that I knew. But we've had sessions that were really good. We've had sessions where we just got a lot done, we got a lot accomplished, and we had sessions where.
Well, I don't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt, I wouldn't necessarily call the sessions bad, and I never would call any session bad because some of the stuff that happens in session have to get out.
It has.
It has to happen. So from a DM looking at it, it's boring. It's time consuming. It's like, can we get on with the story? Can we get on with me doing what I have to do? Is get this. I want everybody involved. This is not getting everybody involved. This is only getting certain people involved in the story. What I want to do, but it has to happen because when you have certain dominant players in a game, primarily, they tend to take over a lot of the role play, and that's kind of what I try not to do so much. I try to take a back seat most time, and I try not to, because, like I said, there's nothing I can't do as far as role playing goes. I don't like taking the control of a group because I know I can't. It's not an issue that I can't. The issue that I can, and I try to avoid it at all costs because when you are a dominant player and when you try to be a dominant player, if that's your goal, it overshadows everybody. And I don't want to overshadow everybody. I want everybody to have a fair share in the role play essence.
So I'm gonna touch on what he's saying, and it might even be disagreeing. You tell me what you think. So in every game, just like at every gym, you're gonna have a hothead. At every game, you're gonna have a dominant guy. You're gonna have a min-maxer. You're gonna have the role player ROLL. You're gonna have the role player ROLE.
I had to think about that for a second.
You're gonna have all these.
Where are you going with that? Okay.
You're gonna have all these. You're gonna have all these different types of players, right? So, we had a guy in our game who's actually still, as an NPC, involved in the game. One of our originals moved to Delaware, and I still message him regularly to see what his character would be doing in the situation he's in. But he moved to Delaware several months ago, and they're still in connection with his character, et cetera, et cetera. And when he was there, even Craig had said at one point. Craig said, "Man, I really enjoyed the game when Mike was there because he really forced the game to move forward. Like he really made decisions. He was a leader and all this other stuff, right? And so you're gonna have characters. You're gonna have certain players who it doesn't matter what you do, they're just never gonna be vocal. They are literally there to roll dice. Like they don't know how to be vocal. In my game back home that I actually have been able to run for a month, but we'll be back soon. Sorry guys, but in my game back home in Beaumont, one of the players, he's been gaming with us for 20 something years. He plays monks. He plays quiet martial artsy type people who are along for the ride. And I mean, I PvP killed him one time in a game that our friend of ours was running because I was his best friend growing up background, and he tried to sell me out for a basic magical item, and then he attacked me in the woods, and I got lucky and I literally got lucky and killed him. There was no other way around it. But I killed a ranger in the forest after being surprised. Like, shouldn't have happened, but I got lucky. And so, that's being a munchkin, right? I would never sell out someone that I grew up with for realistically anything, much less something very mundane compared to what he already had. So if you had a +3 sword, I don't remember what he had off the top of my head, but if you had a +3 sword, I don't see you as a good person selling out your best friend from childhood for a +1 weapon that's not even your favorite type of weapon, which is essentially what he did, because he was a munchkin. He was just power hungry. And I mean, there was a lot more to it, and there's a flip side to every story, but for the most part, right, like right or wrong, you don't sell out your friends unless you're chaotic, unless you're chaotic or unless you're evil. So any of the evils would have done it. Chaotic neutral, chaotic evil, even chaotic good might have done it, right? But if you're in the neutrals, which he was, or if you're good, maybe lawful good. But everything that I allegedly did wrong was speculation. But he was willing to kill me on speculation for an item. I mean, kind of dumb, right? So. I really like, our Saturday game's really fun. We've been playing for almost 2 years. We have 8 PCs. Most of them are original. A lot of people have died. There's a lot of original characters left. And there's a lot of good sessions where there's a lot of last session was, I mean, literally as a spectator, I couldn't tell where the player conversation stopped and the character conversation began. It was that deep, right? So I was really impressed with it. And as a DM, when you sit back and they're like, "No, we go left. No, we go right," you've done your job.
Yep.
You've done your job, right? When they can't determine, when they're sitting down, like you see in a movie where they're knocking pieces over. No, we have to go this way. Like, you've done your job.
For the record, the DM did that.
And so, yeah. So, but the point is, when they're when they're doing that, you've done your job. And one of the things I want to say, guys, we kind of had a tussle. I don't really want to get into it, but we've touched about this, I think, every episode. The more people you have, the more important this piece of information is. So, guys, it's imperative that you pay attention. It's imperative that while Craig, the DM, is talking, I'm not telling Corey what I'm planning on doing, so I can go, "What'd you say, Craig? I'm sorry, I was talking to Corey," and then Craig reiterates to me. Well, now when it's Johnny's turn, Johnny was talking to Mike the whole time, So now he has to reiterate to him. And if he doesn't reiterate, guess what? Someone's going to make a decision they otherwise wouldn't do. And it was clearly the DM's fault because the DM didn't make it clear to him because he was talking. So make sure, guys, that when you're in these games, like we went over this before, don't go use the restroom when you're next in line, or if there's something important going on, like sanction smoke breaks, or try to make sure that you're,
unless you have a medical condition, don't.
None of you have a medical condition where you're forced to smoke.
I'm not saying, as far as the P goes, some people have medical conditions, they might have to go.
So anyway, point is,
except for that glaucoma.
that's right.
Yeah, there you
So,
go.
but anyway, guys, most importantly, guys, pay attention to what's going on. Keep good notes. Some games don't require it. Adventure League's not going to require you to keep notes. It's more episodic, right? It's more, I show up, these are the bad guys I fight, I go home. Tomorrow, the guy that was standing next to me may be there, he may not, right? And here's another thing, guys. The game I was in yesterday, the DM had pages of stuff that he wrote up for the encounter because it was a Battlefield Interactive. It was 3 battles, 3 waves each. Those were 9 sets of encounters. Could you email that to tabletop-rpg-now@gmail.com? That goes in PDF, right? So, guys, anything that you have saved, and it doesn't have to be from 5th edition, storyline for NPC characters, stuff like that, let's keep those things coming, guys. We're going to build that PDF, and then upon request for free, absolutely free, we're going to shoot it out to you guys. So, you're looking for a good set of NPCs, or maybe some extra templates, or extra art types or something like that. We're going to have all that knocked out for you. But we need your help. We want you to send that stuff to us so we can put it together, we can modify it, we can spell check it and all that other stuff.
Yeah, if you can get Scott to email that stuff he did about his world building. Remember where he broke down? That would be great too, but it need to be changed a little bit because
sure.
It was
a little tedious.
Yeah, a little tedious, but it was great. He came up with great ideas.
It was. Scott did an amazing
detailed
job. It was an amazing
kudos,
job.
Scott, if you watch this.
Kudos. It's the only kudos you're ever gonna get.
So to get back on point, talk about what I was asked.
Wait. Is he supposed to be here?
This is his house, so I mean, I guess he is.
I just show up. Nobody says anything, so I just talk.
We fired you before, right? You just kept showing up.
That's right. No, but so like to kind of talk about who I play in his Saturday game. I've been playing for about 4 months now, and like they said, they've been playing for about 2 years total almost. So I'm still relatively new comparatively. I think we're looking at 8 sessions I've been in the game. I play a Dwarven Master Race Life Cleric, half dragon, who, I mean, he's kind of your typical.
There's nothing typical about Elvis.
Not anymore.
No,
headstrong, zealous. He explains to people why they need to listen to him, and then explains to them why any rebuttals they have are wrong.
Mm-hmm. No, like so his background was a custom background. He's an Inquisitor, and I'm sure they've had those as actual classes back in previous editions. I think
in weaker games.
And in Pathfinder, it's like an actual class. Mm-hmm. But basically, the idea is that going into the game, I was kind of forewarned a bit about what kind of party we had, and predominantly to that point, it wasn't a very good party. But due to events in the game, they had been forcibly changed to be good. So I was joining in at a kind of a weird time.
They made bad decisions.
Good wasn't the issue.
They made bad
decisions.
Says the guy who sacrificed prisoners to him.
That was a good decision.
That was actually, for my character, that was a great decision.
Ingenious decision.
That was a good decision because it was wartime.
It was an evil decision, but it was a good decision.
In wars, things happen. That's all I can say.
So there's been a lot of vile acts in the game, and Neva sacrificing her own children for her own goals. I don't even think that holds up to him sacrificing prisoners to lichens. So tied them to trees, things like that. Anyway, so I'm sorry. Continue.
Yeah. So anyway, when I joined the game like that, I knew it was only a matter of time before they did bad things again. So I created a good character who was willing to work with bad people, and I thought that the Inquisitor is a great background for that because, you know, historically Inquisitors were willing to work with heretics to catch the bigger, better heretics.
Right.
Like that. I mean, that's what happened. So I kind of envisioned my character like that. So he's willing to work with bad people to see his good goals accomplished. In doing that, though, he has to have a very firm moral stance on issues. Like, he has to know without a doubt where he stands on whatever issues going on. So Dallas likes to give a lot of tough moral choices, and one of our players always complains, it's like, oh, it's between a shit choice and a shit choice. You know, it's so hard to choose. For my character in particular, it's not necessarily that hard to choose because he has to be definitive in what his beliefs are to be able to work with, you know, not so good people and not become evil himself, not kind of become corrupted by it.
I'm gonna challenge you, you guys out there. I'm gonna give you one of the moral trials that they're forced with now, and I want you guys to tell me what you would do. So there's without going into great description or detail, there is a creature that, in order for it to be defeated, based on the soothsayers, the scholars, and remember, guys, so we've been playing for almost 2 years, and the strongest ones are right around level 12, 13, right? So I play a low-level magic game. You know, again, my setting, I try to make it feel like Kryn, right? Like, Raceland became the strongest in any game ever as D&D worlds go, but he did it in a world that was nowhere near as powerful as other worlds.
Did you explain what Kryn was?
Yeah, we've done a
That's fine.
Yeah. So anyway, so as instructed a few episodes ago, we talked about Raceland and what he was able to do, and it was so much more impressive because he did it in Kryn and he didn't do it in Abertoral Forgotten Realms, right? So one of, you know, in a lower magic setting, it was even harder for them to become blooded. They basically, at one point, they had to fight a very powerful blooded creature that was only mythically rumored to exist. He was already extremely wounded from fighting other creatures, and they managed to defeat him, but he didn't die, obviously. He could have. They just didn't have the means at the time because the ones who could have killed him were down and dead. So one was down and one was dead. So, but later on, another creature that was rumored to exist that's actually not necessarily more dangerous to the realm or the world or whatever. It's just like a polar opposite to this other one. So they've actually been forced into a place to where they actually have to work with this other creature now, who's given them a very powerful item to help them along their way. And now they have to acquire certain types of blood, meaning certain god types, certain gods that fell. They need to go find their blood. There's the Hellenic blood, which is like good stuff, right? It's like radiant type energy, just to make it very simple. And they believe that Helen, the god, at one point actually had defeated this creature. So they know that Hellenic blood can defeat it. At the same time, if you get Hellenic blood and you take other blood types, it putrefies it. It weakens the Hellenic blood. It's one of its falters. So there's entropic blood too, like certain ones like secrets, death, tyranny, war. Not all the evil ones, but there's certain entropic ones, things that lead to an absolution or an ending or a darkness, right? So they have to decide, do they want to go after the entropic stuff and force turning themselves into something corrupted, or do they go after the Hellenic blood, right? Naturally, you would assume what? Well, we go after the Hellenic blood, right? We want the good stuff. We want to be, if you want to be heroic and you want to be good guys. mind you, this party has not always been good. They flip-flop throughout the game. I didn't force them. They've just made decisions, right? To flip-flop throughout the game. Here's the problem. What type of creatures do you assume probably have Hellenic blood?
Good creatures.
Good creatures, right? That's not to say that they're all good, because blood usurpation, or usurpation, however you want to say it, blood theft happens. And so evil creatures could have it, but the entropic type blood is more plentiful, there's more sources, and blood in general is rare. Right?
And there's a time frame on it. You don't have, an eternity to get what you need.
So finding blood in itself is rare. Finding entropic blood is even, because you're going for a specific type of blood from a specific, I think it's like 7 gods or 8 gods that gave these blood types or blood sources, these blood materias that you have to find. Now, going after entropic blood, going after blood is rare. Going after a blood type is even rare, like a specific one. They've narrowed it down to so many. And he now has the ability to pinpoint these complements of the Gorgon, which was the guy that they're now allied with. Now, if they go after the Hellenic stuff, they're going to be killing good people, but because you can't just they can't just give their blood away. Like certain rituals have to happen, or you have to have blood silver, blood theft, the time avral weapons. There's different things that can bring you there. But if they go after this creature, these creatures that have Hellenic blood, if they try to find evil creatures that possess Hellenic blood, that's even more rare, right? And you're on a time frame. So what do? While this is going on, the land they are in, they're not necessarily bound to, but it's still a decent land with good people. There's a growing elven nation with 2 new races of elves who want to reclaim the land that once belonged to them, which is essentially everything in this area. Like this entire area where they're at once belonged to nothing but the elves. So these elves want to reclaim everything, and they're building an elven nation that's on the border of all the kingdoms that they've come to respect and acknowledge. When I say kingdoms, they're in a land where this huge kingdom collapsed, and they're in feudal times. So they're more like provinces. So they're not very strong. So even the strongest ones aren't very strong, right? So they have to determine what to do. Do we go after the elven birthright, or do we go after the apocalypse, or the breath of Ezra, as it's called? And if we go after the breath of Ezra, do we take entropic blood, or do we take Hellenic blood? Or are we willing to kill an innocent baby that was born from a scion, carrier of Hellenic blood, if the blood passed down? Like, would we kill someone because in the overall we're going to be saving thousands of babies, or is that against our wishes, right? So what would you do? It is a strong moral challenge. What do you think? Did I leave anything out?
No, that about sums it up. And that was kind of the big discussion that we were having that he was talking about, was what we were willing to do. Like, we thought it was a good idea to talk about before doing anything what our do's and don'ts were, basically. Like, if we run into this situation, what do we do? If we run into that situation, what do we do? And it's good to have those conversations. Even though it may not be fun for the DM, from players, it's good to know, to have everybody on the same page for when you have those. You don't have the random party member that is like, oops, killed them.
So from a DM's perspective, I've been DMing a long time, and I'm pretty good about being patient. I did lose my patience, but the reason I lost my patience was after the conversation ended, the party was trying to explain to each other where they were coming from, which is good, right? It is good, but typically when you're in a debate, you don't have to convince the other people.
Let me just stop you there, because you're wrong. The argument came first, and then we moved on to that discussion. We were discussing that when you stopped.
No, I know. But what I'm saying is, they were trying to validate what they were saying to each other. That was the that was the overview, right? So it was 2 arguments that were kind of birthing each other. Like they were, So I wanted to get away from the out of character stuff, and so I wanted to get away from the out of character stuff, but it was needed to be said, like because they wanted everyone to explain where they were going and why they were.
Well,
making
that wasn't that was all in character. We were talking in character the entire time.
No, not all. You were, Craig was, but there were others that weren't. Like there were other two people. I'm not going to name them, but there were other two people who literally said the reason I said this is because, and they were talking out of character, which is why I said earlier you didn't know where the players ended and the characters began. Because some players were role-playing 100%, and then you had others who were explaining why they were role-playing the way they were role-playing to other characters. You know, with 8 people in the room, it just kept getting worse. And I'm like, guys, like, that's a little out of hand. Whereas, and I'll use Corey as an example, whereas Corey was probably saying something along the lines of, we can't be killing babies, or whatever the case he said, you know, I had someone else explaining why he said what he said to someone else out of character. So it was just one of those things where certain conversations birthed other conversations and arguments and debates. And so I kind of lost my patience. If it would have all been in character, I would have been fine. You know, I would have been okay with it. I was just trying to stop the out of character stuff. So, but guys, we have about 5-6 minutes left, and so
So can I finish? You keep interrupting me, bro.
Sure.
Yeah. So anyway, that's my character. Here's a dwarf. You know, and their original mission was to go take out this guy who was basically forming heresy. He wanted to, according to what a heresy is. That's the definition of a heresy.
He was a heretic.
Yeah. So basically, in his world, there's different pantheons of gods, and all the different pantheons are real because the real gods died. So you have dragons, which form their own pantheon, angels, which form their own pantheon. You know, yada yada
Demons,
yada.
devils.
And this guy came up and he tried to put them all under one religion, saying, "All right, this is the world. These are the gods. Here's the pecking order of gods since the gods
lines up here.
Yeah, and my lesser god is up at the top.
That's right.
So you know, naturally that is a heresy, and that's why my character is willing to work with these guys to get it done, even though they had bad deeds in the past, and I knew that they had done bad deeds in the past. So we kind of move on. He became an angel and he became a devil at one point, and I guess he was never an angel. He was tricked into becoming a devil at one point, and you know, he dueled the Great General 1v1 and got his ass kicked, and then was saved. And he actually held a grudge against his character for a long time because of that. And it's one of those things where, like, you're mad because you weren't strong enough yourself, right? It's like there's a part of it that he was mad because he was mad because he broke the sanctity of a duel, but a larger aspect was that he needed to be saved in the first place. Is why he was mad. That and he killed an innocent priest. That was the main thing, actually.
He wasn't innocent.
He's like, trust me, guys. I know this random priest I just met.
Hey, I thought about it, and he's guilty.
That's right.
And I'm smarter than you, so you shouldn't question anything.
So anyway, we ended up beating the bad guy
after almost a year.
Yeah, like we went up, we fought him, we got crushed. We got crushed, and the Gorgon, his NPC, saved us and stuck us into these gems. And we basically spent the next 40 years as gems, and we basically became wills, or egos, where you basically become this shadow of yourself, where your most important, you know, beliefs are echoed through you, and that's all you think about. So like basically who you are at your base core. And after 40 years, we got kind of picked up and put into weapons, and we were carried around by a group of heroes who was eventually defeated by a group of villains. You know, me and the wizard, our willpower was so strong that these evildoers couldn't contain our will over them, and we ended up, you know, absorbing their bodies and freeing the others as well. And so we basically got transformed into a bunch of evil heroes, and then we went back to the bad guy and killed the bad guy,
in the bodies of his champions.
In the bodies of his evil heroes. So after that, I went on a rescue mission to go save my son. I have a lot of sons, by the way.
His son is the character who moved away.
Yeah. Basically, I'm a cleric of life, and just kind of in line with that, he's all for
creation,
promiscuity. We'll keep it PG.
Yeah.
So anyway, his son had been captured by like the barbaric hordes in the north, so he kind of gathered everybody together and wanted to go up north and save his son. And everybody did that. During that time, that's when he became a half dragon, because his god, who is a dragon god, which is kind of why he became half dragon, decided that he was worthy of being the champion for him.
The chosen.
Basically, yeah, he's the chosen one of that god. So now he's a half dragon. He's a fat dwarf, got a beard, except he's a half dragon. So basically, just imagine like your stereotypical dwarf and just put dragon face on him, and then that's who my character is.
And he's awesome. He's awesome.
And kind of the biggest choice I had to make, and the toughest choice I had to make was actually one where my character morally knew what the correct was, like, because as I've said, none of his moral choices are hard to make, but out of character, they mean certain things. They mean party members might lose out on things. They mean certain party members just can't be in the party, right? I mean, that happens when you're playing extremes on the spectrum of good and evil. Mm-hmm. And you have opposing, views. And one of the issues we had is we had a lichen in our party, which, as you guys know, is a curse. It's a plague. It's it's vehemently opposed to what I'm about. And I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt because he knew these guys, and he seemed okay. And then I convinced him at one point not to turn a bunch of people who wanted. This is all voluntary, right? They wanted to be werewolves. I convinced him that it was not worth it to do so, and I gave a whole big moral obligation reason, yada yada yada. And then immediately he goes behind our backs and turns other people into werewolves, and that was a big no for me. And then we had a situation where a certain member of our party got turned into a werewolf as well, and this member of our party just happened to be in a great deal of power. Like she had gained an army. She was basically going to be this queen of the kingdom, and the decision was, do I impose that will that I have against lichens on her and try and force her to become human again, knowing that it would probably lose her bargaining chip, her position of power, because she had the army that she had control over was a lot of lichens, pretty much. So going at that end, that was a very tough decision for me out of character, because I don't want anybody to have to lose anything because of what my character is doing. But at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, long term, is it worth it to let a small thing go or a big thing go?
Right.
And I had to make that judgment, and I decided it wasn't worth it. I put my character on the line. I say that she might have lost something. I might have lost my character, depending on how the party voted. Because
True.
Obviously it goes with the party as a whole thinks. But I was kind of the strongest advocator of not allowing her to rule a kingdom as a lichen, because she would basically turn the whole kingdom into lichens, and the kingdom would go to shit, in my opinion.
Or be awoken.
which turned to shit.
So anyway, but I guess the whole thing is when she made that decision, it forced the decision of the actual lichen in our party. He basically had to go at that point. Like there was no real way for him to stay, because we basically told him flat out that we made that decision that we're not going to let him turn people. And then he was like, well, I'm not cool with that, so I'm out. And that was tough, because he did say that he gets stressed out about things like that. And as a character, as a player, I'd rather my character bites the bullet on stuff that I'm doing, but that's not always the case,
Right.
But when I made her make that decision, I made sure that I had an alternative option for her. I didn't just go say, no, don't do this, or I'll attack you, or I'll leave.
You had a very creative one.
Yeah, so I messaged him. I was like, look, I'm the chosen of my God and he's the God of life and creation. Is it possible for me to transfer my life energies to her? Because, like I said, we had spent 40 years and they were already pretty
old. She was old.
Yeah, she was like 90 something by this point.
Her body was old.
And she was a barbarian. So knowing her, how she was, I knew that she accepted the lycanthropy to secure her age so that she wouldn't be old. So I had asked him if it was possible for me to transfer my life force into her. And he allowed me to do that at like a 2-1 ratio, so I'd gain 2 years for every year I gave to her. Which, that's kind of what I ended up doing. Is I was like, look, if this is your only goal here, then here's the alternative option. I didn't just say, no, you can't have what you want. I'm threatening to leave the group. I'm threatening to attack you. I don't think that out of character, it's a good thing to try and tackle situations in that way, because then you're forcing players, not characters, to think, well, is it really worth me losing another character over?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that whenever possible, it's good to, and you won't always have the option to provide alternatives, but whenever possible, you should try and think, if you're forcing a character to lose something, you should think of a way to either dampen the blow or give them something in return.
So touch on what you said about Neva being old. So our next episode is going to be about sculpting settings, and before we conclude, this bad guy that they fought, that they had to deal with, actually wasn't meant to be the main bad guy. He was meant to be like a problem, but nothing they really had to deal with, and he became like the huge focus, right? Because he was left untouched, and so he had aging effects, which in the old days, aging effects was like horrible, and they don't have it incorporated yet. But also in the books, they talk about like adamantium weapons or whatever, and there's not a lot to talk about as far as ores goes. So for my personal world, like in my setting, I use different ores like cinnabril, red steel, silver, adamantium, mithril, all those things. Like we actually still use those, and I also like encourage the dungeon masters out there to keep track of the age of your game, because it's really fun when they continue through a storyline. Like, you shouldn't become, if you read Elminster's stories, he didn't hit his level going through 4 dungeons. It took a span. And so there should be times where time goes on, and that should affect certain races over others. I actually modify the aging in my world for the races, because I don't see the purpose of an elf living for
1,000 years.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So anyway, they all still live long, but the point is, certain things in the books are touched on, but they're not concrete. So you can take those and spin them any way you want. But I do encourage using carrying capacity and using age, right? Your starting age, rolling your max age. She was like 97 or 98, and I think her max age was 101. She was on the cusp.
Yeah, that's close.
Agro was too, though, right? Agrimordius,
he still is.
Yeah,
don't say was. He is.
I got some time.
He's got time now, but he was like, how old were you? What was your end?
My end was 108 or something, 107, something around there, and I, at the time where it really became an issue, I was at 89.
Yeah. Okay. So I thought you were in the 90s.
I am now.
Yeah.
I'm in the 90s.
So it's cool. How the characters have aged and things like that. Especially like in Birthright, you're supposed to play descendants and blood lineage. You're supposed to continue the path and things like that. And I've always appreciated legacy characters, because when you play, for example, the daughter of Agrimordius, or the son of Agrimordius, or the son of Alvis, like, where they came from for the most part. You know what happened. So
I don't always know where my kids came from, though.
I only got one out there. So
well, I thought they came from the graciousness of Songkarn.
That's right. I just provided myself a lot of class options if I want to reroll. That's all that I did.
We have tieflings, we have everything, you know. So,
That's right.
Real quick, guys, before we conclude, thanks for watching. Thanks for being here, Craig. One of the things I want to say before we end, though, is we're going to start shooting, because we're getting so many questions, we're going to start shooting a Q&A series that won't be live streamed. It'll just be uploaded to the same channel.
Right.
So, along with our live stream that go to YouTube under Tabletop RPG Now, there will be another series of videos that aren't live streamed, but will also be in there. Now, they're not going to be nearly as long. They're going to be 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, something like that. And they're exclusively going to be going into further detail of your questions and other primary questions that have been asked throughout the series.
This guy's fallen so far behind on answering them now.
I'm falling behind, right? But anyway, guys, that's it. We appreciate it.
That's our show. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, follow us on, watch our live streams on Twitch TV / Tabletop RPG Now. You know, obviously you can watch us at YouTube. Same name. You know, email us your story ideas, your cool concepts, all that cool stuff, and we'll work it. We'll tweak stuff. We'll do all that cool stuff and release a cool PDF for you guys.
Yeah.
You know, we hope to have more guests in the future. Craig may make a comeback.
Let us know if you want to see him again.
Yeah. You know, we have to have racial diversity on the show, you guys.
That's right.
You know.
That's right. We could get rid of Corey.
Bring an Asian? Bring an Asian?
We'll need an Asian. We'll need an Asian. But anyway.
So yeah, if you like our videos, if you hit our videos, let us know. You know, like, subscribe, and you know,
shoot your questions and information, guys.
Yeah, we're a little bit over, so we'll shut him up and go ahead and log off now. We'll see you guys next time.
Oh. God, Corey gets on my nerves. Jeez, man.